Welcome to the State of Us. It's Sunday night. We've got the old gang back together. Ellen and Carl, how are you doing?
Is it still Sunday?
I feel good.
You feel good?
I feel energized.
Really?
Yeah.
That's just the pizza.
And now I'm bathed in the power of democracy.
Okay, let's go. Okay, so here we are. It's the first night of counting. Is that where we are right now, or like how many more days do we have of this to go? Like, it's been an extraordinary 24 hours in Irish politics. 10 o'clock last night, Saturday night, the exit poll came out with a three-way tie. Ellen, how do you think it's unfolded from that point to where we are at this stage?
I mean, immediately you had Fine Gael kind of trying to snatch some good news and spinning their 0.1% lead.
Ireland's largest party.
The largest
Yes.
party. I mean, at the time of recording, I think Sinn Féin's share has gone up to nearly 24%. And first thing in the RDS on Sunday morning, that's what the Sinn Fein party was saying. It's kind of gas to watch Sinn Féin topping the poll everywhere. In some parts getting like 2 quotas. And then the conversation going back to it's been a radical change, the most shocking Irish election in the history of the state. Is it going to be Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael in government? It's still kind of, there has been some thawing from Fianna Fáil on the Sinn Féin issue.
Some thawing?
Well, Micheál Martin was basically came out and was like, it's what sounded like a complete U-turn. He was backed up by Robert Troy, who gave an interview on News Talk. But then later on Sunday, you had Jim O'Callaghan and Michael McGrath being like, no, they completely fucked the country. We have to stick with the same position. Fine Gael isn't even entertaining the idea, even though I think most people would agree that the fact that both of them had come out so soon and ruled out Sinn Féin was a massive mistake.
But is it seems extraordinary because we talked about this before, that Fine Gael's differences with Sinn Féin seem to be very much rooted in the present and the future, and what their economic how much
well,
they
that's
diverge.
the way they spun it.
Yeah.
Even at the start of this podcast, you can hear that quote from Leo about the balaclava slipping. It was clever of Leo Varadkar to cite in the debate the fact that, they see Sinn Féin as fiscally irresponsible, that they don't see them as being good enough on issues like the Special Criminal Court, to make that their reason, because I think they knew that the stuff about the past wasn't landing with voters. And now Micheál Martin has stolen that strategy and is parroting what Leo Varadkar was saying the whole way through.
Whereas Owen Murphy is now telling you that the housing policy.
Yeah, they're Sinn Féin have just did a control copy and paste of Fine Gael's action plan on housing, on rebuilding Ireland, and put it in the Sinn Féin manifesto, and people loved it.
Carl, where do you see it going from here? Because this has been I think most of us expected there to be some more hesitancy before. Fianna Fáil abandoned this core principle, or Micheál Martin abandoned what seems to be this fundamental red line.
Clearly we've all underrated the seduction of power. Micheál Martin clearly sees his chance to become, he's waited in the wings for a long time now, almost 10 years, and now he sees his chance to become Taoiseach, and I think he's probably willing to do pretty much whatever it takes. Whether or not that actually flies with his own party and the core of Fianna Fáil voters and other Fianna Fáil TDs who really don't want to peg themselves to Sinn Féin remains to be seen. But I don't know what's going to happen. Clearly they all are prepared to open their doors, with the exception of Fine Gael, but Sinn Féin and Fianna Fáil seem to be very prepared to talk to each other. You even saw, I spoke to Ruth Coppinger today from People Before Profit, and there's a clear sense of anxiety now in the parties that are to the left of Sinn Féin, that Sinn Féin are very, very prepared to, as Ruth Coppinger put it, rescue Fianna Fáil and bring them back in to the fray politically. So as for what happens now, it seems like the expedient thing to do, if Micheál Martin is already saying that there are just some difficulties that need to be overcome, that's the kind of thing that can be ironed out in a conversation. And, maybe, Micheál Martin will soon be, happily taking orders from the shadowy Ard Corla himself. So
that would be a step even further if he actually joined Sinn Féin.
Yeah. But I mean,
at the end of this process,
it is just so interesting because of, you know, how viscerally and how, you know, the first debate that Mary Lou wasn't a part of, the head-to-head between Leo Varadkar and Micheál Martin. Micheál Martin said that Sinn Féin aren't a normal political party, and by that he was referring to the fact that their members have ties to the IRA and things like that. Whereas now this is being boiled down to just kind of differences of opinion. It's no longer, oh, they're not a party that does business in a normal way. It's they're a party that we can maybe find some common ground with.
Well, incompatibilities is a phrase that suggests, well, you know, it's hard to know. Maybe it doesn't, like, if you say you're incompatible with somebody, maybe that's, you can't bridge that. But sometimes, you know, there's a way of becoming more, you know, of finding a way of meshing those incompatibilities.
Well, I think the
together.
fact is that if you suggest there are incompatibilities, the kind of corollary to that is there are also compatibilities. And you know, the fact is that Micheál Martin all through this campaign was emphatic that he wouldn't go into government with Sinn Féin, and as soon as Sinn Féin have taken the polls by storm and are getting first preferences left, right and centre, breaking records, blah blah blah, he's in a situation where he is ready to renege on that almost immediately.
Ellen, what do you think Fianna Fáil's best strategy is, or what are they thinking their best strategy is here? Because surely when you look at like how Sinn Féin have performed, and the idea, like Fine Gael are kind of just backing away for now and saying let's leave it to other people, but the idea that Fianna Fáil could go into government supported by Fine Gael, say, in some sort of confidence and supply or whatever, and allow Sinn Féin to be on the opposition and to build on this, you know, massive result would seem to be a huge risk if they were to take that, if to go that way.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you wanted to destroy a left-wing party, the best way to do it is to bring them into government with you if you're Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. Obviously, it's not just Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael that have to look at Sinn Féin now. You have people like Labour who also made a massive mistake in saying that Sinn Féin, they wouldn't go into power with Sinn Féin. So now you're going to have people on the left building a relationship with Sinn Féin, especially if they were the lead opposition party. You also have the fact that there's lots of people in Solidarity, people before profit, this kind of socialist groupings who are cleaning up on Sinn Féin transfers all over the country. So they're going to be kind of the official opposition. So imagine you have a Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael grand coalition, and then the opposition is like this new alternative left-wing version of Sinn Féin that's very divorced from its past, support in a closer relationship with Solidarity, people before profit. It makes Ireland more left-right than we've ever been
for the
before.
first time ever. You'd probably have a dedicated shadow cabinet, and you'd have people basically seeing the one that got away. You'd be looking at a shadow housing minister, Owen O'Brien, Luas shadow finance minister, Pierce Doherty, you know, shadow minister for sport, Catherine Murphy, and Catherine Murphy from Soc Dems. So like, people, I think, it would cut in such stark relief the difference between the establishment, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, and the parties like Sinn Féin and People Before Profit, and to some extent the Greens and Soc Dems, who are really cutting out a whole new vision for Ireland.
Ellen, you were in the RDS today and you saw, like, people were saying that the reception Mary Lou McDonald got was like nothing people had ever seen down there. Like, what does that do for a politician and for a political party? Because we've seen it in other countries. We haven't seen it too much here when people are elected on a kind of wave of hope and that expectation. Like, you know, her quote about, you know, we won't have we're not going to have 5 years of a housing crisis. Like, there are things like, and housing is the thing they've been elected on. That's what has got them elected. I know health was polled as the highest, most important issue, but I think housing, we all kind of feel, is the one that matters. So what does that do for them to be elected on this wave of hope, to have this huge expectation, you know, and focus from the media?
Yeah, like, she's basically had the campaign that Fine Gael wish Leo Varadkar had when they elected him in 2017. This idea that rather than being a party, it's a person on first name terms. And you would have heard a lot of people throughout the campaign saying they were voting for Mary Lou, not for Sinn Féin, even people outside of Dublin Central. So she has become this kind of individual personality now. It was a very individual-led campaign supported by Pierce Doherty and Owen O'Brien. And there is a huge huge wave of expectation on her. And you could even hear herself, like she was prioritising housing much more than the traditional Sinn Féin issues, despite the fact that I think the exit poll on Saturday night said that everybody from the age of 49 under was overwhelmingly in favour of a border poll over the next 5 years. I think it was like 60% from people 49 under, and it was as high as 75% for people aged 18 to 24. But you could see like her clear red line that she was talking about today was the rent freeze. So if she does go in with Fianna Fáil, we're going to have a referendum. We're going to have a referendum on housing rights, where people are going like #home to vote against their own landlord. It could make or break Sinn Féin, and I think it'll all depend on the lifetime of this government and this 33rd Dáil.
And what will their thinking be? Like, we've talked about Fianna Fáil's strategy. What will Sinn Féin be thinking, do you feel, at this point about, like they've said, Mary Lou said they want to make a left government if they can, but that seems to be just something they're going to put out there before.
It's quite a fraught time, I think at the end of the day, Mary Lou McDonald has been very, very clear that her door is open to work with any party. She hasn't ruled out working with Fine Gael. She hasn't ruled out working with Fianna Fáil. First thing she did today was make it clear that her first phone calls were to the left parties, were to Soc Dems, People Before Profit. Now, you could take that at face value and think that she's trying to form a left government. There's also the school of thought that you could think that she's basically offering Sinn Féin's hand to these parties so that when they reject whatever she's offered, she can say, well, look, I tried to have a left government. They left me with no option but to go in with Fianna Fáil. But I think as far as their strategy, they'd be very well advised to look at what happened to the Greens after they went into coalition with Fianna Fáil in 2007. They were wiped out. Labour, who went into coalition with Fine Gael in 2011, they were wiped out. And the Progressive Democrats, who were, they don't even exist anymore.
But have things changed? Like, if there has been this fundamental change, and we all, like everyone is, you've referenced those today as well, those cases of parties.
But changes mightn't be as fundamental as they seem. In 2011, Fianna Fáil were reduced to about 20 or 21 seats. Throughout the polling here, they've basically tied Sinn Féin, and they are, within the margin of error, they are all thereabouts equally as popular as one another, and Fianna Fáil will probably end up with the highest share of seats again. As far as fundamental change when it comes to Sinn Féin's ascendancy, Labour did get 37 seats in 2011, and now Labour are a non-factor. So we can talk what it is. It's a major change, and it's a change that could become a fundamental change. But I think it's not a fundamental change yet. We have to see whatever Sinn Féin decide to do next will determine just how fundamental the change is.
But my point is really as much to do with our expectation around how governments perform and how they operate when one of like a left-wing party or a smaller party goes into coalition with Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. Like, if things have shifted the way they seem to have shifted, surely there is an opportunity now for Sinn Féin to go in, even if they're a smaller party, but to go in with a clear agenda, with red lines, and with like Eoin O'Brien as housing minister makes perfect sense, because there's nobody else that most people would. That's what people have voted on. People have voted practically for a housing minister, which is almost a new thing. It's like, so they do have an opportunity, even if they are in government with Fianna Fáil, to actually ensure that it isn't a government that does where Labour or left party does the bidding of a bigger party, but they actually can drive through their policies.
Yeah, that's kind of the best case scenario for Fianna Fáil as well, because they obviously understand that the two-party state system is over. So if it turns into a grand coalition between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, the political spectrum, the centre doesn't hold. Like, all that stuff that Micheál Martin was saying in 2016 doesn't apply anymore. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael become even more blended together. They become more right-wing in people's minds, and then you're just waiting for a left-wing minority government the next time round.
Like, Sinn Féin could have run scarecrows as running mates in 8 or 10 constituencies this time and picked up 8 or 10 seats. Like Alan says, like the double quotas, the first preferences that their candidates are picking up are huge in so many different constituencies. So if you have a situation where, like, Fianna Fáil will probably desperately want Sinn Féin to go into government with them, because if it ends up being Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, you're basically just going to have, like, you know, Sinn Féin doing like a Rocky montage in opposition for 5 years, just like getting stronger, building up, and next time they'll come back. Like, even if the election was held 6 months from now and Sinn Féin ran, you know, 15 more candidates, the suggestion from the evidence we've seen is that they would pick up maybe 12 more seats. So if they go into opposition, a really fully fledged opposition, paint themselves as the diametric opposition to whatever Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil suggest, you're going to have a situation where Sinn Féin could come back next time and take, you know, 50 seats.
But doesn't that give them huge power in any negotiations then with Fianna Fáil, say? Because it's like, well, it's either us or you're with Fine Gael and we're the opposition as you've laid out. So like if they want to get they in some ways, even though there's this threat of an election in 6 months where they come back with more TDs, like if from a policy point of view, they should be pushing an open door right now with Fianna Fáil.
Yeah, but like I heard Mary Lou McDonald did an interview with Gavin Riley on Sunday where he put that prospect to her and was like, you know, what are your red lines? And obviously it's more likely to be, if that happened, it would be more likely to be Fianna Fáil than Fine Gael. And the only thing she said was the rent freeze, and sure, Fianna Fáil have a different position on that depending on what day of the week it is, so that's not even, and she didn't say anything else. Like, she wasn't even that strong on the border poll within 5. So like, what are Sinn Féin's red lines for a coalition?
That's But they still have policy, especially on, again, to keep coming back to housing. Like, they do have policies on housing.
Yeah, but they'll get their rent freeze, which is like the number one policy that got through to those people aged 18 to 34. So like, that's not that bitter a pill for Fianna Fáil to swallow.
That's it. I think that, like, the legitimacy that will come, I mean, the allure of the legitimacy that will come from Sinn Féin finally being in government probably outstrips the prospect of them spending another 5 years in opposition and growing stronger to the point where they could maybe lead a coalition 5 years down the line. They'll probably hope that they can go into government now, perform as well as possible, and maybe the most heralded moments of the next 5 years come on the back of Sinn Féin policies like the rent freeze. That's probably what they'll be hoping, and they'll hope that they can lead a coalition off the back of that, as opposed to 5 strong years.
And what do you mean by the legitimacy of it, of government?
Well, you know, like, it's not long ago that Sinn Féin had 5 seats, were led by Gerry Adams. Have members who can't get into the United States. Things like that. The Sinn Féin are still very much, as we've seen, by the rhetoric taken, the rhetoric of Leo Varadkar and Micheál Martin, Sinn Féin are still closely associated with the IRA and a paramilitary past. So the fact is, if they get into government, that's a seismic change for them. Like, kind of forget about a seismic change for Ireland. The idea that basically this party that has its roots in paramilitary struggle is now, in government, and in government on the basis of its housing policies or its healthcare policies, is that's what I mean by legitimacy.
But I wonder at the same time, like, what examination of those links, again, you've seen it, like, with the Paul Quinn situation, something that most people weren't paying attention to. It wasn't that it was made political capital out of it, it was just that everyone was paying attention this time. I wonder if you're in government and, not just a nation's media, but like international media, everyone starts looking at those connections, which remain, which still exist. Like, there's very few people who dispute, like, I know Sinn Féin figures joke about shadowy figures controlling them and all this sort of stuff now, but nobody disputes that there is a link, and there are controls in Sinn Féin that are different.
Yeah, I suppose that's kind of what I mean, because
but if they're now examined when they're in government, like, could that be damaging for them?
But see, I think it could be damaging, but I think they'll also have the perspective that if you have Owen O'Brien performing really well as housing minister, Pierce Doherty performing really well, Mary Lou McDonald performing really well, that you can point to your current present day achievements and say, yeah, well, that's in the past, and look how well things are going right now.
But it's not in the past. It may not be in the past.
It may not be. It may not be in the past.
Imagine,
I just think
Justice Minister Jim O'Callaghan at a doorstep answering questions about a Paul Quinn type thing that's coming up from his coalition partner, and then not having Leo Varadkar, whoever the future leader of Fine Gael is, standing up and saying you're legitimising this shadowy stuff. Like it's a mess, basically.
Yeah, which is, and that is all along why, Micheál Martin and Leo Varadkar hoped Sinn Féin wouldn't be in this position. Like, they absolutely don't want to be doing a deal with Sinn Féin. It's just that that's all that's really left to them.
And it's funny, like, do you think Sinn Féin are in such a powerful position now that, maybe there was, at one point you might have said, right, one of the prices that might have been paid if they wanted to go into government would be to make some, break with that organisational structure, to say, right, a bit like the long negotiations for decommissioning arms, that this would be the next step in their legitimisation, that they would actually make some gesture or do something to release their politicians from whatever other structures they're tied to. But now they don't need to. Like, now they have the other parties where they want them.
Now, I think they kind of have, I think they're going to be forced to do it now.
Do you?
Yeah, because, listen to Mary Lou coming in on, this monumental election for Sinn Féin and not talking first about a united Ireland. The first thing she talks about is a rental freeze. Obviously that's appealing to a totally different Sinn Féin voter. And they're going to be conscious of that. There's two different Sinn Feins now. There's the Gerry Adams Sinn Féin and the Eoin O'Brien Sinn Féin. And maybe if you have more people like Eoin O'Brien, Louise O'Reilly kind of coming into the party, it changes naturally. But there's going to be internal conversations in Sinn Féin where they have to decide what kind of party they are now.
How surprised? We've talked about the campaign. You talked about Sinn Féin having the campaign that Fine Gael wanted. How much a factor do you think their campaign was, or has this been a reaction to everything else as well? And again, housing was a factor, because you can look at it one way and think it wasn't that inspiring a campaign. I
think it's interesting, like you noted with Mary Lou McDonald turning up the ODS today, basically like the second coming of Jesus. And Mary Lou McDonald is a formidable leader, and she's a great speaker, and she has a great mind at work, but she's not Barack Obama. She's not like an inspiring, charismatic. She's plenty charismatic, but she's not like a charismatic leader in the old school sense of the word. So it's interesting. I think that really just highlights the appetite there was among Irish people for an alternative. And I think Sinn Féin basically met that low bar and threshold for strength, a low bar for ideas, a low bar for alternative. That's not to say that, they're not offering decent solutions, but just that it was a low bar. People were ready for change. They wanted something. And Mary Lou McDonald and Louise Riley and the rest were able to give them enough to cling to.
I remember when Leo Varadkar was running for leader of Fine Gael and to become Taoiseach by default, talking to a Fine Gael figure outside the Red Cow Hotel for the first debate. And he talked about the Fine Gael members going in to hear the debate, and he said they love him. He was talking about Leo. And then he gestured out to the kind of M50 and beyond, to kind of Ireland. And he said, and they love him out there too. And when we talk about Mary Lou, again, as you said, the campaign and the image Fine Gael had for Leo Varadkar and what they felt, the connection they felt he was going to have with the people of Ireland, has been demolished by this election. It's been where does he go to from here?
In one sense, I feel like Leo Varadkar must be one of the unluckiest politicians in Ireland to finally become the leader of his party and the Taoiseach right at the moment when the Irish political system basically combusts and everything changes. And on the charismatic thing, in 2017, people in Fine Gael were turning to journalists and saying, people want to take selfies with Leo Varadkar, as if that means anything. And 100% through this, his first general election campaign as party leader, people did want to take selfies with him all the time, and people did respond to him as if he was a celebrity, exactly what the parliamentary party wanted when they elected him. Teenage girls coo over him, and people take selfies, and owl ones love him and fancy him. But people respond in exactly the same way to Marty Morrissey, but they're not going to trust him to pass the budget.
I might.
And Fine Gael just made a big mistake, totally conflating celebrity and politics. Leo Varadkar is very warm and had a really good campaign and wasn't awkward and wasn't unfriendly and was very popular everywhere he went and seemed really like nice and handsome and normal. But the change in this election and the lack of support for Fine Gael, I think, was kind of brewing long before he ever even made his first move to take over as leader. And I think that depending on who's left on the Fine Gael backbenches, there's certainly going to be conversations over the next few days about his future as leader of the party in the long term. I think he'll stay around for a while.
Pretty much they were fooled by a tall man with a pretty face, and we've all been there.
Yeah. You were out at Leo Varadkar's count in Dublin West today, and as we speak at 9:15 on Sunday evening, he is, I see from Rob O'Hanrahan's latest tweet, he's still he needs 20 votes.
He's still not. So after 4 counts, I think he's not over the line.
He's still not getting, which is like, this is the some dispute. Some people say this is the first time ever a Taoiseach hasn't been elected on the first count. Somebody said first time since 1977.
I've seen 77. I've also seen 83. I've seen a few different things.
But it's it's the first time in a very long time.
The pub quiz
Again,
people.
You can listen to more like it's like the Mayo, whether Mayo was one constituency.
Yeah,
if you want the actual,
the Irish Times have a podcast.
If you want to know these things, if you want to know these things, go to a pub quiz. That's not what we're here for. We're here for the real stuff. But yeah, so like to cut it, I'd love to see a side by side of it if there is video footage compared to Mary Lou's grand entrance at the RDS. Leo Varadkar arrived at around, I would say, 5:30, 6, anticipating that he would get in on the second count off the transfers from Paul Donnelly of Sinn Fein. And instead of people, rapturous applause and cameras flashing and everything, Leo was kind of greeted by his own aides, maybe 24 maximum, and they all kind of stood in the doorway and chanted "Leo, Leo," and it really was quite sad. Like it was much more. It didn't have that same feel of like, thunderous, rapturous arrival of this new Messiah type figure. So yeah, like you say, Mary Lou has kind of stolen exactly the kind of image and vibe that Fine Gael had always hoped Varadkar would carry. Then the atmosphere after that was really something else, something to witness, because Varadkar was gathered with his family. His family were there.
So Paul Donnelly had been elected.
Paul Donnelly had been elected around 3 p.m. and people had known that was coming for hours. Yeah. The assumption was that Leo Varadkar would get in the second count. So the returning officer got up there to read out the second count. Leo Varadkar was surrounded by his family, his sisters, his nephews, his parents, and he read out the transfers, and Leo Varadkar didn't have enough. And it was a Ralph Wiggum moment where you could see the shock, I
felt sorry for him.
It's Leo Varadkar, he's the outgoing Taoiseach. He doesn't show up somewhere unless he has to be there. And he showed up 20 minutes before that count, clearly assuming he'd be out of there after another 20 minutes, and that is just not what happened. He's obviously still there now, 2-3 hours later, as we head towards the 5th count, because he hasn't got in on the 3rd count or the 4th count. So to call that, he's clearly shocked, shell-shocked. What that's going to mean, especially because presumably he didn't show up earlier for Paul Donnelly's kind of victory party, because nobody wants their party leader standing around looking like a loser waiting for his name to be called. But that's what they've ended up with. Even though he turned up so late, they've still got 3 hours of shots of kind of a lonely looking Leo not picking up his seat. So I think that's going to raise, optically it's terrible. I think it's going to raise serious. It's another thing is he's failed to bring in a running mate. I think Emer Curry tapped out at about 4% of the first preferences, so she's no hope at all. So I think that's going to put a serious dent in his credentials going forward as to whether he can continue as leader of Fine Gael.
And where do you see that going, Ellen? Because you say he'll be leader for a while, but like Simon Coveney has said, this isn't a good result from a Fine Gael perspective. He's ruled out confidence and supply as well, I think. And what does this mean for that? Because the party members back in 2017 they voted for Coveney. So this hasn't been a surprise to them in some ways.
Yeah, and anyone who's been reading constituency profiles in Cork South Central it's just the same paragraph over and over again. Simon Coveney shows up to a door, a woman answers, looks sad and asks him why he's not the leader, and he gently puts his hand on her arm and says, "Stop that." So that's been, and the shift in the political system has not happened over the last 3 weeks, and it hasn't been all Leo Varadkar's fault. So we could have been in a parallel universe where Simon Coveney did an incredible job as Taoiseach, tackling the role of Brexit on his own, and this could still be happening. But it's going to be very easy for maybe bitter Fine Gael grassroots members to think that things would have been very, very different if it had been Simon Coveney who was leader, and that's a complete hypothetical, so nobody's ever able to challenge that. If Leo Varadkar does go, the two obvious people are Simon Coveney and Paschal Donoghue. Even before the election was held, Michael Noonan had given an interview saying that Paschal Donoghue would have been his choice, and that it was no secret that last time round Michael Noonan really wanted Paschal to have the top job. Paschal, kind of in his affable, I'm just a guy who loves Star Wars kind of thing, has already insisted that he never wants the job, which I find difficult to believe. But yeah, it's those are the two natural choices. And I guess when you look at maybe a depleted Fine Gael parliamentary party, it's not going to be long before people start talking about that. The other thing I think that might happen, and we'll have to wait until the count's finished, is certainly the entire 33rd Dáil, and probably Fine Gael in particular, seem to probably lose out on women again. I mean, nobody did spectacularly in terms of barely having over the 30% quota for candidates this time round, and I think that people are saying the 2016 Dáil might end up being a peak for gender equality in Leinster House, which is pretty depressing. Yeah.
And where do you see the government formation going this week, over the next couple of days? You're going to be back in the RDS at 7:30 tomorrow morning. I don't want to remind you of that.
I know. Why did I even, why bother leaving? Remember last time there was people shooed into a corner with a sweeping brush basically, while some innocuous family event had to be set up in the centre because the counts go on for so long. But I think we'll start to see how things fall tomorrow. A lot of the parties, even Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, are kind of saying different things on what's going to happen now. They've both had an absolute shock. I think the electorate has put manners on Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael for their complete dismissal of Sinn Féin. We will have to go through the motions and at least have the left-wing parties pretend to try to put a government together. Obviously Mary Lou will be nominated for Taoiseach, and people will be watching very closely to see if people like Labour support that nomination. Soc Dems, Greens, obviously Solidarity, People for Profit probably will. And then I guess it's do Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael want to risk forming a grand coalition and handing Sinn Féin more power?
Okay, guys, listen, you've done phenomenal work today and all through the campaign, and there's more to come tomorrow, and then just take a few days off before we get ready for the next election. But before we go, I am hearing that Leo Varadkar, Taoiseach, leader of our country, has been elected.
Yay.
So play that music they play at the darts when a set has been won. So that's
sing it, Dion.
Play it. This is like when they don't play the sting. Anyway, on that note of triumph for Leo Varadkar, is at least a personal triumph that he can now go home. Yeah. That's sometimes being
everybody
able to go
deserves
home
to go home
is
at this
a
point.
victory.
Yeah.
We've all been there where you've had a night out and it's not great, and it's actually getting out of here. Yeah. The Irish exit, go without saying goodbye, just sneak out
go
the side
opening the Deliveroo app before he's even in the chauffeured car, telling Matt to load up Netflix or something before he goes home.
So that's it. So he's had a good day in the end. So
happy for him.
So we will be back with another show tomorrow to find out where we're going, and until then, please subscribe on all the usual channels, and if you like the show, please leave a review.